Hello BookTube, I'm Jonathan and welcome to Words in Time. Now in today's video I'm going to be talking about Empire of Silence by Christopher Ruocchio. So what is this book all about? Well, thousands of years in the future, humans are able to travel across the galaxy, and most planets are ruled by the Solan Empire. Although there are some humans living outside the rule of the Empire, and they're known as extrasolarians. And perhaps even more interestingly, there are aliens, an alien species known as the Cielson, which the Empire views as enemies. So the Empire has quite a hierarchical structure. It rules with an iron fist, and there is a powerful institution within the Empire, a religious institution known as the Chantry. And they have control over a number of aspects of society, but one thing that is quite interesting is the way they control technology. They use technology to control the masses. They've actually restricted and demonized a lot of technology. So even though this book is set so far into the future, a lot of people are living a pretty basic lifestyle, although a privileged few have access to some pretty awesome futuristic tech. So I thought that was a really cool and unique aspect of the novel. So what is the story? The story is told from a first-person perspective by Hadrian Marlowe. Now, at the start of the book, he tells us that he goes on to destroy a sun, and depending on your perspective, he's either a hero or a monster. We'll have to read on and decide for ourselves. So, what's interesting about the book is that it goes back to sort of the beginning of his story, and he recounts his tale, and it stays in that timeline, although he does give you little snippets, little nuggets of future perspective, sort of a different take on what was happening at the time based on what he knows now. So those are always really interesting. And the plot follows him as he goes from world to world, and even though he is quite privileged, he is from Palatine blood, he takes a beating, both figuratively and literally. There is setback after setback for Hadrian. So even though he's a very talented man, he's not just going on a swashbuckling adventure where everything goes his way. This is a real grind of a story for Hadrian. Now, within the world, we have a lot of characters. This is a big world. There's a lot of rich history, a lot of different factions, and there's too many for me to go into in this review, but just some of the interesting characters to me were Alistair Marlowe, Hadrian's father, who's kind of an authoritarian father, Tor Gibson, a mentor of his, Kat, a young girl who lives in the streets that he meets, Gilliam Vass, a Chantry member who creates some obstacles, Dr. Ondera, who's a xenologist who's very intriguing to Hadrian, Switch, a fighter in the Colosso, and that's just some of those characters, guys, and that's just the humans. So there's a lot going on in this book, and what I loved about the characters in this book was they're also fully realized. A lot of books will have kind of a main cast with pretty fleshed out characters, and then some outer characters that are a little bit more two-dimensional, a little bit more tropey. But I felt like all of those characters that I mentioned, and many more, had real motivation, real personality, real depth, and I love getting to learn more about all of them. So even though there are a lot of characters, the story relies quite heavily on Hadrian. He is telling the story, so even if you don't have to like Hadrian, I think you need to find him interesting because you spend so much time with him in his mind, hearing his perspective, and he was a very interesting character to me. I was very intrigued by Hadrian because even though he is aware of his privilege, he still holds and struggles to shake certain biases. Even though he loves soaking in knowledge, he's a very intelligent guy, Hadrian, but despite that, at times he can be rather immature and make some irrational decisions. And I found myself rooting for him because it felt to me that he had a heart, but at the same time, he would also make decisions, there were actions that he would undertake that I didn't necessarily agree with. So I think with Hadrian, you have a character that I've spent 700 pages with, and I feel like I got a real understanding of him, and yet I still quite haven't got him figured out, which I think is really wonderful. It definitely makes me want to read the next book in the series, and hopefully all of them. So there are a lot of themes that are explored in this book. It is a pretty epic space opera, but I think a strength of the book is actually how it explores people, both individual relationships and societal structures. And I think there's been a lot of care and thought put into this book because there are so many wonderful insights that Christopher Ruocchio makes, where I thought to myself, I had never thought of that before, or if I had thought of it or come across that idea, I hadn't seen it articulated or worded in such a simple or succinct way. So a lot of love has got into this, and if you love exploring those relationships, power dynamics, struggles, political wheelings and dealings, there's going to be a lot for you to enjoy in this book. Some of the other themes that the book explores are the way that religion, technology, surveillance, violence all play a role in society. And what I found really interesting about this world was it's quite a dark world. Christopher Ruocchio has painted quite a dark picture, but there is some hope there. I don't think that this is a negative worldview. I think this can be a tough and brutal world at times, but there are moments of light, moments of brightness within that darkness. So I really enjoyed the kind of the depth of that, but there was always that little something just tugging me along. Now the writing, a lot has been made of the writing in this book. It is, as we do our customary flick through on the channel, around 700 pages, and I think the plot probably could have been told within about 500 pages, but I never got bored, I never got tired of it for two reasons. One being that in the slower moments, I never got bored because I was always learning something. There was always interesting dialogue amongst characters where I found that I was either learning something about them or about the world itself. So some of those more relaxed, sedated moments were actually some of the highlights of the book. So I think it's almost unfair to call them slow. I just think there's a lot of world building and a lot of philosophy going on in here. And if you like that kind of thing, I think this is definitely going to be a book for you. The second reason that I never got bogged down in a rather chunky book is that the prose is just wonderful. There are a number of times where I would catch myself just going back to reread a sentence because of how poetic it was or how poignant the thought was that was being conveyed. So I love wonderful prose, although that's not necessarily a requirement for me, but of the sci-fi books that I've been reading recently, this is definitely at the top of the pile in terms of the writing in and of itself. So I hope you guys enjoy it too. Now, spoiler-free, obviously, but the ending, I felt like in terms of the plot, we found quite a nice breaking point here. It is clear that this is book one of a series, and there's a lot set up to explore further in the next books. But what I really liked about the ending of this book was it found an emotional peak. There was a certain storyline and arc which I thought found a real emotional high at the end of this book, and I found very satisfying. I thought it was actually quite interesting because I was looking at the book. I thought, there's about 50-60 pages to go, and this is a pretty good end point. And then it did end. At the end of the book, at least in this paperback, I love my mass market paperbacks. In this edition, there's an index at the end of characters and planets and language, and that was really cool actually. Because there was more about that I wanted to learn, and I got to spend a little extra time digging around at the end. So if you like those little extra details, there's a little bonus for you there at the end. So, my rating for the book. As you can probably tell, I'm pretty excited about it. I'm going to give Empire of Silence a 9 out of 10. I really, really enjoyed it. I think... Oh, I know, I've already got the next book. I'm diving headfirst into this series. I'm super, super excited. I really have no complaints. I think to just nitpick to what could have made it a 10, maybe an extra sci-fi concept to do with physics or technology or something, just to blow your mind, just to kind of take it to that next level. And there really wasn't anything that I didn't enjoy. There's maybe one scene where one character tells another character something kind of crazy and the other character doesn't believe them, and I thought they might have. I think it came down to cultural differences, but you know, in a 700-page book, that was literally the only page where I thought, I'm not sure I understand that, but I think it makes sense in retrospect. So I'm really nitpicking to find something to complain about, you guys. I absolutely love this. Thoroughly enjoyed it, and I'm really excited to keep going with the Sun Eater series. Who would I recommend this to? I think if you like fantasy and are thinking about dipping your toe into some sci-fi, this would definitely bridge the gap. I think if you're into sci-fi and want to try some fantasy, this would also bridge the gap because there's some elements of both. But if you're just interested in sci-fi, as this is a primarily sci-fi channel, there's definitely enough sci-fi content and concepts in here to keep you happy as well. So there you go, guys. If you haven't read it, let me know if I've sold you on it. Let me know if you're interested in picking up the series. And if you had, let me know your thoughts in the comments and whether you enjoyed, whether you've picked up or started the rest of the series as well. I hope to catch up to you soon. So, as always, guys, thanks for watching, and come back soon for another sci-fi book review.